journalists that are members of our federation, our professional association. We've been shaken for the past 2 years. 2 years ago was the attacks on Charlie Hebdo, and we've never in the past seen an entire newsroom being decimated like that. In the past year, we've seen a presidential candidate that has attacked directly journalism, journalists, and media, and in a way that's never been seen before in the history of presidential elections. He's threatened to sue journalists, put into question the Constitution and whether the laws that protect free press are even founded and good. And this person today is the President of the United States. So what you're seeing today, today the main sort of journalism associations in the States and institutes, Pointer Institute, the SCJ, the sort of main thinkers in journalism have been writing and sounding the alarm for the next few years in the United States. And here we are on the subject of tonight, facing journalists here in Quebec who are being spied on by the police. Maybe we need to just take a little moment to re-explain why this is such a concern for a democracy. Journalists are able to tell the public the truth about what happens because they have sources who trust them, who trust that they can speak to them in confidence. And if you're working in a public institution, or maybe you're a policeman and you see something that is really reprehensible, and you can't go to your boss because maybe your boss is turning a blind eye, or maybe you're worried you're going to lose your job. Well, one of the only ways you can go to anonymously tell the public what is happening is to go to a journalist. And up until now, we thought this trust was safe. And what I'm wondering now is how many people who are working in public institutions, in the police, in the government, who were thinking of going to a journalist to tell them reprehensible acts, corruption, to tell them about these kinds of events, and who are right now thinking, there's no way I'm going to talk to a journalist because they're being listened to by the police, as we've seen. Listened to, followed by GPS, perhaps. At least my number will figure on there, will show up on the list of phone calls that they've been making. And so this chilling effect on journalistic sources is what it's all about. And it's not about, I'm here to represent journalists, but I think it's really important to say that this is not about journalists. It's not about giving a privilege to journalists. It's about the public, because the public is the one who is the loser at the end of all of this. The public is the one who's not going to be getting real information. And if that happens, if sources are not talking to journalists anymore, we are all left in the dark. So I think it's really important to look at how we are in Quebec going to set light, just analyze and really understand what is actually happening in Quebec, because we don't know, we never thought this would be possible, and maybe we were all naive, but we really believed in our institutions and that the police and justices of the peace and our judicial system was actually protecting and safeguarding these fundamental values of our society and our charter of rights and freedoms of free press and free expression. And so we pushed really hard since last week to get this public inquiry, and we got our public inquiry, and I think this is a really positive thing. But this is going to take time. It's going to take a year or two before even the first recommendations are made, and then before those recommendations are put into place, who knows how long that would be. So I think it will be really interesting to talk tonight about what can be done right away. I think there are 3 avenues that we really need to look in right from the get-go. The first one is sort of the concrete actions that we can take in our press rooms, in our media, as journalists, to provide training for journalists. We're doing, for example, at the FPGQ, at our professional association, several trainings in the next few weeks, including at our annual Congress next weekend on encryption, on how to secure your communications, what is the latest equipment you can use, what can be actually listened to by police, what can't. And there are lots, this is developing very fast, lots of apps you can use, lots of technology you can use. So we're sharing all of this information together. I think there's immediate steps that have already been put into place by the government, which is that the Justice of the Peace, who actually approved these search warrants, these surveillance warrants on journalists, won't be able to do it by themselves anymore. They will need the approval of the Prosecutor's Bureau, the DPCP, and this I think is very important, very positive, so at least in the immediate future, journalists are going to be considered on the same level as lawyers and judges and elected officials before there is a surveillance warrant on them. The second avenue we need to look into, I think, is this kind of public talks and raising awareness through the media, but through our academic institution as well, to talk about our fundamentals of our democracy and how we can protect them. And this is part of what we're doing right now, and we're going to be having lots of discussions in the next few weeks at the FCGQ, and as I said, at our Congress next week, and it's open to the public, and ministers are going to be there, and we're going to have this sort of big social debate and discussion about how we protect our free press. And finally, I think it seems to me that there needs to be a legislative route, and it needs to be at the federal level because it has to do with criminal law, and it seems that we need a law that is going to protect journalistic sources and journalists, and some countries are leaders in this matter. Sweden, Belgium, some individual states in the US. In Belgium it is completely illegal to spy on a journalist unless there is an imminent terrorist threat or somebody's life is directly in danger. And we are so far from what we saw here, which was spying on journalists in order to find a policeman who was talking to the press in order to protect the police's image, really. So, we're eons away from that, and it seems to be, I'll be really curious to hear about our legal experts here, but it seems to me that a legislative route is a really important one too. So, thank you.
I thought I would give you a quick overview of the legal issues that are involved in search warrants with media. And Andrew, I'm a lawyer, so if I go over the 7 minutes, please cut me off. But I think to understand the law as it stands today with respect to search warrants directly against the media, I think you have to go back to the two principal cases of the Supreme Court of Canada dealing with protection of sources, namely R versus National Post, the Andrew McIntosh case, and the Globe and Mail versus the Attorney General of Canada, the Daniel Leblanc-Machouette case. The court in those two cases had to deal with three possibilities for recognizing a journalist source privilege. First possibility was a constitutional privilege rooted in Section 2B of the Charter of Rights. The second was a class-based privilege similar to the lawyer-solicitor-client privilege. The third possibility was a privilege based on a case-by-case analysis. Now, the Supreme Court rejected the first two options unanimously. It rejected the constitutional privilege on two grounds. First, it said that while freedom of the press is constitutionally protected, and the right to gather news information is implicit in freedom of the press, it goes too far to suggest that all news gathering techniques are constitutionally protected. And the court pointed to a couple of examples. For example, checkbook journalism, which the Supreme called a routine method of gathering news, and the court said that checkbook journalism should not be constitutionally protected, nor should techniques such as hidden cameras or telescopic lens, which might constitute an invasion of privacy. The second reason I rejected the constitutional privilege revolved around the difficulty of defining what is a journalist. The protection attaching to freedom of speech is not limited to traditional media. It is engaged by everyone who exercises his freedom of speech on matters of public interest, including bloggers and tweeters. And the court said this: to throw a constitutional immunity around such a heterogeneous and ill-defined group of writers and speakers, and whatever sources they undertake to protect, would blow a giant hole in law enforcement and other basic rights and privacy. The court also rejected the class-based privilege, such as the case with the solicitor-client privilege, for two reasons. One, there's no formal accreditation or licensing process for journalists, no professional organization regulating them. Two, it's not clear who holds the privilege, because in a solicitor-client privilege, it is clearly the client who holds the privilege and has the right to waive the privilege. In the case of journalists and the journalist and the source, it's not clear if it's the source that holds the privilege, the journalist, or maybe both of them at the same time. Journalism is not a profession of the type that professional secrecy purports to protect, according to the Supreme Court. The obligation of silence in, for example, the solicitor-client privilege is rooted in a relationship where the beneficiary of the privilege seeks the help of the professional, seeks in a personal matter. The obligation of confidentiality is in the exclusive interest of the person who disclosed the information. That, the Supreme Court said, is not the case in a journalist-source relationship. So, having rejected the first two options, the Supreme Court said it was nevertheless essential to recognize some sort of relative privilege for the protection of sources. Why? Because the public has an interest in being informed about matters of public interest that may only see the light of day through the cooperation of sources